We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet to share these conversations on the Vegan Compass podcast.
We extend our respect to elders past and present, as well as any of our listeners and guests. Hello and welcome to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change. We are your hosts, Ric Allport and Mackenzie Cross.
From wherever you're listening, please be sure to like and subscribe to support this podcast. Now to the episode.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Vegan Compass podcast. This week it's a news episode where we take you through the latest in animal rights, plant-based living and sustainability news. I'm Mackenzie Cross.
And I'm Ric Allport. Today we've got a mix of the good, the inspiring and unfortunately the distressing news in the world of animal rights and veganism. We'll cover everything from technological advancements in plant-based meats to some tragic losses in the animal kingdom. Let's dive right in, Mackenzie.
So Ric, let's start on an inspiring note today. Researchers are exploring whether AI can improve plant-based meats, and this is huge. The article in Mirage News talks about how artificial intelligence is being used to make plant-based proteins more like their animal-derived counterparts. Texture, taste, and even the way they cook. What do you think, Ric? Can AI help take these products to the next level?
Absolutely, Mackenzie. This is what we've needed. Plant-based meats have come a long way, but this kind of AI precision could really define those last few points of difference that people cling to when arguing against going vegan. If AI can help recreate the juiciness or texture without the cruelty, then I say bring it on.
Speaking of eating vegan, here's some good news that might help everyone's wallets. A recent article by 9 News draws on a US study that found eating a healthy vegan diet could reduce your grocery bill by up to 20%. This one didn't really surprise me, Ric, but I think a lot of people still have this misconception that being vegan is super expensive.
Exactly, Mackenzie. I think that stereotype is partly rooted in how expensive some branded vegan products can be. But this study really highlights that if you're focusing on whole foods, grains, beans, vegetables, it's actually quite affordable. It's encouraging to see that shifting to a vegan diet isn't just kinder to animals, it's also a win for your budget.
Totally. Now, let's switch gears and talk about a story that's frankly quite disturbing. In Australia, a man was sentenced for throwing a live chicken to alligators at a wildlife park. This was reported by the ABC News. Ric, it's these kind of stories that make my blood boil. This isn't just animal cruelty. This is an act that shows a complete lack of empathy.
I know, it's heartbreaking. To see a living, sentient being used for shock or entertainment, it's a stark reminder of the work we have ahead of us in advocating for animals. I think we need tougher consequences for these kinds of actions, and more importantly, a societal shift that makes this kind of behaviour completely unacceptable.
Right? It's about education and changing attitudes towards all animals, not just the cute or traditionally protected ones. Speaking of shifting attitudes, here's a bit of good news. New Food magazine reported that the demand for vegan options at events has skyrocketed by 280%. This surge is driving what's being called a plant-based Christmas boom.
That's fantastic. It really speaks to how plant-based living is starting to become more mainstream, even in those traditionally non-vegan spaces like holiday events. The more these options are present, the easier it becomes for people to make compassionate choices. Imagine a Christmas dinner where vegan options aren't just a token afterthought, but the main attraction.
I love that thought. Now, we have some promising news on the cultivated meat front too. Green Queen recently reported about Benna Meat's efforts to produce cultivated meat, but for animal companions. Food for our animal companions is a huge part of the meat industry, so it's wonderful to see a lab-grown alternative emerging.
Absolutely. Animal companions are part of our families. but feeding them shouldn't mean perpetuating the suffering of other animals. Cultivated meat for animal companions could be a game changer in helping vegan animal guardians have a better solution, especially for cats, where there is debate about whether a vegan diet is suitable.
Now, Rick, unfortunately, we do have a really heavy story today. Birdwatch Ireland recently announced that the slender-billed curlew is officially extinct. This bird's extinction should be a wake-up call for all of us, especially considering how we continue to encroach on natural habitats.
Yeah, it's devastating. Every time we lose a species, it's a stark reminder of the destruction we're causing. This isn't just about bird species. It represents an entire ecosystem that's been thrown off balance, and it highlights the urgent need for conservation efforts. We're losing these beautiful creatures, and we need to act now if we're going to save others.
It's true, and it's heartbreaking, but it's also a call to action. Speaking of heartbreaking, we also have a tragic story from Canada. A young gorilla at the Calgary Zoo died after being crushed by a hydraulic door. This story from the New York Times just emphasizes how unnatural captivity is for these incredible animals.
Exactly. Gorillas are highly social and sensitive creatures. This young gorilla, named Iare, was just 2 years old. She was part of a troop that had its own dynamics and relationships. Being crushed by a hydraulic door is not just a tragic accident, it's a direct consequence of captivity. These enclosures are full of risks that simply don't exist in the wild. Hydraulic doors, confined spaces, unfamiliar sounds, these are all stresses that these intelligent beings shouldn't have to endure. The idea that an animal so young, with so much life ahead, could die in such a horrific way is gut-wrenching. It underscores how inadequate zoos are in meeting the needs of these complex animals. Zoos might claim that they're about education or conservation, but at the end of the day, these animals belong in the wild, not behind bars.
Couldn't agree more, Rick. Okay, let's finish up on a high note. Summarizing everything we've touched on today, we can see demand for vegan food options, cultivated meat for animal companions, so it really seems like people are waking up. These stories, even the tragic ones, are mobilizing people. It's fantastic to see how veganism is becoming a more visible part of society, especially at big events.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that change is happening bit by bit. Each plant-based Christmas dinner, each family that switches their animal companions to cultivated meat, every person who decides not to contribute to the suffering of animals, they all add up. We're moving forward, and that's something to hold on to.
That's it for today, everyone. We hope you found this episode of the Vegan Compass podcast both informative and motivating. Remember, every small step we take can create a big difference for animals, the planet, and our health.
Thanks for joining us today. Let's keep pointing our compass towards a more compassionate world. Until next time, stay vegan and stay hopeful.
Thanks for listening to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change.
Be sure to follow us on social media at @thevegancompass_podcast. See you next time.